Hello everyone, it's me, your curator, Kevin Atkinson, coming to you with another Live at 5. And today, from a viewer request, we will be talking about Eero Saarinen's contributions to his father's buildings here at Cranbrook School for Boys. It is a gorgeous, breezy 75 degrees here in Bloomfield Hills, so it's great to be outside. I am in one corner of the historic Cranbrook School for Boys quadrangle, which was constructed between 1925 and 1930, designed, of course, by Eliel Saarinen. And a lot of times when I'm doing tours, people come to Cranbrook, they know the name Saarinen, they know the Gateway Arch, they know Dulles, TWA Terminal, and they are often surprised that they are here looking at Saarinen the senior and not Saarinen Jr.'s designs. Though Cranbrook may not have any buildings by Eero Saarinen the younger, we do have a lot of different things that he contributed to the design of this campus. Of course, at Kingswood, there is the furniture. He designed almost 40 different types of seating furniture and tables and office furniture for Kingswood. At Saarinen House, he designed furniture as well. But here at Cranbrook School for Boys, this is where we consider his first architectural projects to have been completed. He designed in the South Lobby a series of 5 tiles depicting sports, as well as some other Pewabic elements. But today I want to talk about his little stone grotesque and his other stone sculptures, as well as his 2 gates that are here on the Cranbrook campus. So this is the very last part of the quadrangle that was completed, Page Hall, named after the Right Reverend Herman Page, who was the Episcopal Bishop of Michigan from 1924 to 1940. And Page Hall is part of the dormitory complex. We have Marquis Hall here with the dormitories, and then there's Stevens Hall over here with more dorms, and Page Hall is right in the center. And it's the most really Art Deco that Eliel Saarinen ever goes here at the School for Boys, which is done more in this English arts and crafts, vaguely Gothic interpretation of eclectic revivalism. And Eero Saarinen, the son, designs for his father a series of grotesques. Now, a gargoyle is a stone sculpture with a face that spits water. A grotesque is a stone sculpture with a face that does not spit water. So these would be considered grotesque, not gargoyles. And Eero would have been just 18 years old when he designed these in 1928 to 1929. The drawing in Cranbrook Archives, which survives, and I'm going to post on Instagram a little bit later today. Eero Saarinen drew the front of the face as we see it here. Then he sketched out the side, the profile of the piece, so that you can show the depth of where the stone mason would need to carve. And then he also delineated the plan of each piece. And so as I move the camera around, I hope you get a sense of how sort of pleasingly bulbous and sculptural these forms are. And yes, these would be decoration, not ornament. Great question from the audience. As he designed these, he is really engaged with I think both his father's history of faces in architecture. If you look at Eliel's buildings from the 1890s in Helsinki, they often have stone gargoyles and grotesques that are related to sort of Finnish history and Finnish culture. Eero takes up this sort of Finnish Jugendstil or Finnish Art Nouveau, and he manipulates it into his own language. But he's just 18 years old, so the fact that these look like faces designed by his father from a few decades earlier, I think makes a lot of sense. Now, Eero also designs ones that are simply decorative, little almost botanic forms, a spiral here, and then next to it, almost a flower form. And when Eero was growing up, he was by 5 or 6 years old making paper dodecahedrons and all sorts of constructions. He was drawing in the drafting room with his father, alongside his employees, alongside his older sister, Pipsan. And so Eero was, from a very young age, artistically inclined. His mother, Loya, used to present him as the future genius. She was very proud of her son, and she was very promoting of his future career as an artist. But when he set out to study art and commit his life to art and design, he didn't go straight to architecture like his father. He instead went to his mother's chosen calling, sculpture. And so Eero Saarinen headed out to study sculpture in 1929 in Paris, just like his mother had done. And so these sculptures are done before he had gone off to Paris to study sculpture. And these are done entirely through the education of his mom and dad. He had spent time working with his mother, building the architectural models out of plasticine clay and wood of Cranbrook. So he had been on the ground with his mother building little architectural sculptures. But he had also entered things like the Ivory Soap National Sculpture Competition, which he won in 1928 when he was a junior at Birmingham High School. It created quite a Detroit sensation that this Finnish immigrant had won a national soap carving competition. When he graduated from Birmingham High School in February of 1929 is around the exact same time that he was designing these little faces. And they do repeat as you move around. So you see there's our shocked face again, as well as the sort of spiral form. But then there are also others that I need a longer painter's pole to show you in detail. Up at the top, there's this sort of old man with the large beard, as well as this almost cat-like neighbor. On this side, we have a little flower form. Notice the brick arch above the piece of Indiana limestone. All of these buildings are load-bearing masonry construction, and Eliel wanted all of the bricks to express their brickness, and so all of the windows, the principal windows are arched. They don't have a steel lintel, and so he's expressing the sort of construction of Page Hall. And it also, because they are stone and brick buildings, it demands these very narrow medievalizing windows, because he doesn't want to use a piece of steel to be able to get a huge sheet of glass, but instead creates this very Gothic stone and glass and brick arrangement. Now, we can see there another man sticking his tongue out at us. They're kind of rude overall. But we have entered into the great Page Hall baldachin. You might call it a gazebo if you want to be less terminology correct, but also perhaps less pompous. But we will call it a baldachin. And here we see more little decorations by Eero Saarinen. And so these are almost more folk inspired. They're sort of pure geometries. I often think of them like a sketchbook of designs, where Eero is sort of thinking about everything that he's seen growing up in Finland, growing up in this environment of beauty and work. Also what he's seen here in America, his father's work, the sculptures of Cranbrook, their work, and he's creating this sort of endless variety of little rectangular decorations in a number of different forms. And Eliel is the designer of this baldachin, and Eliel designs this great iron dome, which was made in the Cranbrook Forge here by John C. Burnett, who was a Scottish blacksmith who immigrated to work for Cranbrook and died shortly after the studios opened. So he only worked here for about 3 years. But this is one of his masterpieces and an example when you look back in the archival records of how Eliel Saarinen would design in all sorts of materials, because he, like his son, thought of architecture existing from the building to the city to the interior to the teacup. But he wasn't an expert in all of those materials. And so John Burnett describes how difficult this was to make a 9-foot square within this art in the center. And it has this motif of sort of birds taking flight. And so Eliel designs this whole arrangement, and it's Eero who comes in and is given the commission to design these little squares. Here's one that almost looks sort of Czechoslovakian modern. And Eero suggests to his father, instead of just putting my decorative rectangles onto your columns, why don't we turn the columns in? And it really turns Eero's design, again, he was 18 when he's doing this, into almost like pillow tacks. It makes this very solid material, solid stone blocks, into, they almost feel like textiles, like upholstery as you look at them. It gives them this great depth. The sun was out all day and went behind a cloud right before I started, but when the sun hits these, it creates very interesting shadows as they turn the corner and then as they catch all of these little geometries. And Eero did not go to Cranbrook because Cranbrook was not open yet, so they moved here. They immigrate from Helsinki in 1923 to Chicago and then Ann Arbor, and they get to Bloomfield Hills in 1925 to design the school. The school's open to class in September of 1927. Eero could have gone here, except it opened with only 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, and he would have been a senior, so he stayed in the public schools. Later, the grandchildren went to Cranbrook, and then the Great Depression hit, and they had to leave Cranbrook because George Booth would not give a tuition discount, and they could not afford to send the kids to Cranbrook. So most of the Saarinen family went to public schools, which are great here in Birmingham, Bloomfield. Now, down below, we have another stone arrangement that is a father-son collaboration. And I wanted to talk about these pieces, these examples of Eero and Eliel Saarinen's designs, father and son, because on Thursday it will be Eero Saarinen's 110th birthday and his father's 137th birthday. Or no, older than that, 1873 and 1910, both born on August 20th. So they do have twin birthdays, father and son. So I thought it would be fun to look at this, their first real built collaboration. Now, if you have any other questions, do type them in. I want to look at Eero's other great contribution beyond the little faces, a set of 2 gates that mark the entrance into the infirmary. Now, I myself, as a curator, have questions about the attribution of elements like this. Is this designed by Eliel Saarinen, or is it designed by his friend, the Hungarian sculptor, philosopher, architect Géza Marotti, who was the first sculptor in residence here at Cranbrook, and whose style these line up with perfectly. I think it fit within Eliel's conception of a cathedral village being the best way to educate young architects, that he would have relied on all of the talent around him, whether that was his son or his colleagues or the masons to help design. But it just makes me wonder who exactly is coming up with all of these abstract shapes. In the case of these columns, I think we see Eliel Saarinen full force, because they are so similar to what he designed in Helsinki in the 1890s to the 1910. these funny abstractions in the beauty arch. And I think you can see the sort of similarity of father and son with those pieces. Now, this pathway, those of you who have visited the campus know it leads up to the Art Academy, but it is flanked by these beautiful iron gates, again crafted in the Cranbrook Arts and Crafts Studios in the Cranbrook Blacksmith Shop by John C. Burnett. This gate depicting a deer. And Eero Saarinen designed these from September to November of 1928, when he was just 18 years old. And so the deer, which is this sort of wonderful repetition of circular forms, from the overall circle to the little spiral, to then the cloud forms, and then the body of the deer, the antlers of the deer, all of this sort of riffing of semicircular forms within this very controlled frame atop the gate within the semicircular brick archway. And so Eero would have designed this as his father was designing the wall, and the design drawings are just all from the Cranbrook Architectural Office. So all of this is coming out of the workshop, and I think it's a interesting way of working that was unusual then and is certainly unusual now, where it is just the architect's purview is all of this. And then Cranbrook has the added benefit of craftsmen who could make it in the building next door to where it had been drafted. Now, opposite the deer is the Dragon Gate. And the Dragon Gate, notice he changes how it is framed. It's still within a larger brick arch, but now the sort of middle section comes up and the dragon is larger and he is more sort of dynamic and geometric. It has these lightning bolts coming out from around him, but he's also sort of connected to this almost plant form that's growing up, which when you look at graphic design of the period, remember, Eero Saarinen's 18 years old, so he's a genius, but no artist is pulling out of thin air. And so I think Eero is reflecting even some of the books about his father. And you look at what the Saarinens had in their library, especially the catalog of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's big Architecture in the Industrial Arts show, which his father had been featured in. And this could almost be one of the chapter headings of that book. So it's very much in this sort of Art Deco graphic design vogue. But what makes it so special to me is the dragon's head, which really reads like a horse. And a horse was something that Eliel and Eero felt was, if a man could draw a horse, or an artist could draw a horse, then you knew they could do anything. And so Eero, when he would interview architects to come and work for him, he would say, well, why don't you draw me a horse? And he could tell within 2 lines if they knew how to draw a horse and if they were a good architect. And so Eero, who was drawing animals nonstop as a child, here sort of manifest one in iron. There is one more gate in this series. It's on the other side of this building, and there's no easy way for me to get to it. So we'll save it for another Live at 5, the Snake Gate, which some of you saw if you saw the 2006 to 2009 traveling exhibit about Eero Saarinen. The Snake Gate was removed, restored, and went on display, which is how I saw it in college my freshman year. Now all the gates are back on their hinges, protecting these courtyards and the emergency exit. And so Eero Saarinen, after he designs these pieces in late 1928-29. He goes off to study sculpture in Paris for 8 months. By the time he returns, things at Cranbrook are quite different. The Arts and Crafts Studios have changed. The Art Academy is getting up and running. Kingswood is ready to be designed, and Eero goes full force into designing for Kingswood. design at Kingswood is very different. It's much more, even though the scale of it is still handmade, it's a much more production model. He designs one dining room chair, and then they are executed by the hundreds. So I think this is a really sort of special example of his career, within his career, of him designing just these tiny, discrete elements within his father's building. The last piece that he designed for the School for Boys, and I meant to put one in my pocket because I have an example from the old Cranbrook gift shop, is he designed the little crane inset in the back of the dining room chairs. We no longer sell them. Get on eBay. You could have your own little Eero Saarinen late casting. He, of course, would go on in 1931 to head off to Yale to study architecture, do 3 years of school in 4, and then return to Cranbrook and the golden age of the Art Academy, working with his father and his uncle, and then setting off on his own after his father's death in 1950. And that's when he designed the Gateway Arch, the GM Tech Center, the headquarters of John Deere and Bell Labs, and CBS, TWA Terminal, Dulles Airport. He does all of those buildings in the 11 years between his father's death and his own death. So I hope you've enjoyed this little Live at 5. I hope on Thursday that you're doing something to celebrate Eero and Eliel's twin birthdays. Maybe I'll put out balloons in front of Saarinen House. And I would be remiss if I did not wish today a happy birthday to Bob Swanson Jr., Eero's nephew, Eliel's grandson. It is his birthday today. So I can only imagine what it was like when all the family was having birthday parties in 1 week. I hope you're having a great week yourself. Wear a mask, be safe, stay home. I'll be back tomorrow from Saarinen House on Facebook, Live at 5, talking about the Saarinen's dinner services, which is another collaboration between father and son. So if you want to see more Eliel and Eero material, make sure that you're on Facebook tomorrow at 5 o'clock Eastern. And then next Tuesday, I will be delivering a lecture at 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. on Cranbrook and the Bauhaus. So I mentioned a couple of times today how all of these artisans and studios were workshops were all happening here. There are a lot of reasons why you can consider Cranbrook and Cranbrook Academy of Art to be an American Bauhaus, which was the German school of art and design that operated from 1919 to 1933. It ended the same time that Cranbrook really began, and I'll be delivering a lecture about the Bauhaus in Cranbrook next Tuesday. You can sign up for that and buy your ticket on the center.cranbrook.edu website. So I hope to see you tomorrow on Facebook. I'll see you next Tuesday for the Bauhaus lecture. And if I don't see you there, I'll see you next Tuesday here on Instagram, Live at 5. Have a great rest of your evening, everyone. I hope that wherever you are, the weather is as beautiful and ideal as it is here, where a life without beauty is only half lived. Thanks for watching, everyone.